Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement on sentencing in England and Wales. As the House will be aware, the Independent Sentencing Review was published today. It was chaired by the Right Honourable David Gauke. His panel comprised experts, including a former Lord Chief Justice and representatives from the police, prisons, probation and victims' rights organisations. The Government is grateful for its recommendations. I will ensure a copy is deposited in the libraries of both houses, and today I will set out our in-principle response. But first, it is essential that we set this review in its proper context. A year ago today, the party opposite called an election. They did so because they were confronted by the prospect of prisons about to collapse. Rather than confront their failure, they chose to hide it and hoodwink the public into re-electing them. It didn't work, but their legacy lives on. Our prisons are, once again, running out of space, and it is vital that the implications are understood. If our prisons collapse, courts are forced to suspend trials. The police must halt their arrests. Crime goes unpunished, and criminals run amok and chaos reigns. We face the breakdown of law and order in this country. It is shameful that in this day and age we are confronted by this crisis once more. Absolutely. The reasons are clear. The last government added just 500 places to our prison estate, while at the same time sentence lengths rose. And as a result, the prison population is now rising by 3,000 each year, and we are heading back towards zero capacity. It now falls to this government to end this cycle of crisis. That starts by building prisons. Since taking office, we have opened 2,400 places. Last week, I announced an additional £4.7 billion for prison building, putting us on track to hit 14,000 by 2031, the largest expansion since the Victorian era. This investment is necessary, Mr. Speaker, but not sufficient. We cannot build our way out of this crisis. Despite building as quickly as we can, demand for places will outstrip supply by 9,500 in early 2028. And that is why I commissioned the sentencing review. Its task was clear. This country must never run out of prison places again. There must always be space for dangerous offenders. At the same time, the review was tasked with addressing the fact that our prisons too often create better criminals, not better citizens. Instead of cutting crime, they are breeding grounds of it. The reviewers have followed the evidence and the example of countries around the world. Today, I present an initial response with further detail to follow once legislation is placed before the House. Let me start with the report's central recommendation: the move to a three-part sentence called the earned progression model, which the government accepts in principle. Under this model, an offender will not necessarily leave prison at an automatic point. Instead, their release date will be determined by their behaviour. If they follow prison rules, they will earn earlier release. If they do not, they will be locked up for longer. This echoes the model I witnessed in Texas earlier this year, which cut crime and brought their prison population under control. Under this new model, offenders serving standard determinate sentences with an automatic release of 40 or 50% will now earn their release. The earliest possible release will be 1/3, with additional days added for bad behaviour. The review suggests a new maximum of 50%. But for those who behave excessively badly, I will not place an upper limit. For those currently serving standard determinate sentences with an automatic release point of 67%, their earliest possible release will be 50%. And again, for those who behave excessively badly, I will not place an upper limit. David Gauke also suggests those serving extended determinate sentences should also earn an earlier release. This we will not accept. Judges give extended sentences to those they consider dangerous, with no parole board hearing until 2/3 of time served, and I will not change that. I can also confirm no sentences being served for terror offences will be eligible for earlier release from prison. In the second part of the progression model, offenders will enter a period of intensive supervision. This will see more offenders tagged and close management from probation. The government will therefore significantly increase its funding. By the final year of the spending review period, an annual £1.6 billion will rise by up to £700 million, allowing us to tag and monitor tens of thousands more offenders. If offenders do not comply with the conditions of their release, the sentencing review has suggested that recall to prison should be capped at 56 days. We have agreed to this policy in principle, though the precise details will be placed before the House when we legislate. In the final stage of the three-part sentence, offenders could still be recalled if a new offence is committed, and I will also ensure that the most serious offenders continue to be subject to strict conditions. The review also recommends a reduction in short prison sentences. A compelling case for doing so has been proposed in this House many times. In the most recent data, nearly 60% of those receiving a 12-month sentence reoffended within a year. With reoffending rates for community punishment consistently lower, we must ask ourselves whether alternative forms of punishment would make the public safer. It is important, however, to note that the review recommends a reduction in short sentences, not abolition. It is right that judges retain the discretion to hand them down in exceptional circumstances. In considering exceptional circumstances, we will continue to ensure courts have access to thorough risk assessments for domestic abuse and stalking cases, and breaches of protective orders linked to violence against women and girls will be excluded. The review also recommends an extension of suspended sentences from 2 to 3 years. In this period, the prospect of prison time hangs over an offender should they break any conditions imposed upon them, and we accept this recommendation. The recommendation set out above will see more community punishment, Mr. Speaker, and for that reason, it is essential that it works. The review recommends a series of measures to make community punishment tougher and to force offenders to pay back to those they have harmed. We will consider new financial penalties, which could see offenders' assets seized, even if they are not knowingly linked to crime, and expanded use of punishments like travel and driving bans, which would curtail offenders' liberty. We accept a recommendation to expand intensive supervision courts. These impose tough conditions, including treatment requirements that tackle the root causes of prolific offending. Offenders are brought before a judge regularly to monitor compliance, and the prospect of prison hangs over them like a sword of Damocles. But I believe community punishment must be tougher still. Unpaid work must pay back. So I will shortly bring together business leaders to explore a model where offenders work for them with a salary paid not to the offender but made for the good of victims. I will also work with local authorities to determine how unpaid work teams could give back to their communities, be that filling potholes or cleaning rubbish. Mr. Speaker, I also invited David Gauke to consider cohorts of offenders this government believes require particular focus. I welcome his recommendations on female offenders. Approximately 2/3 of these receive short sentences, around the same number are victims of domestic abusers. And I am pleased to say the review's recommendation on short, deferred and suspended sentences will reduce the number of women in prison. I also asked David Gauke to consider how we tackle foreign national offenders. Today, our deportation rate is ahead of the last government. I welcome the recommendations to make it quicker and easier to deport foreign criminals. Under the existing scheme, they are sent back to their country of origin after serving 15% of the custodial sentence. We will bring this down to 30%. We will also conduct further work with the Home Office on how we can deport foreign prisoners serving less than 3 years as soon as possible after their sentencing. I also asked the review to consider how we manage sex offenders. The review has recommended we continue a pilot of so-called medication to manage problematic sexual arousal. I will go further, with a national rollout beginning in 2 regions covering 20 prisons, and I am exploring whether mandating the approach is possible. Of course, it is vital that this approach is taken alongside psychological interventions that target other causes of offending, like asserting power and control. Mr. Speaker, when discussing sentencing, it is too easy to focus on how we punish offenders when we should talk more about victims. Everything I am announcing today is in pursuit of a justice system that serves victims. If our prisons collapse, it is victims who pay the price. And by cutting reoffending, we will have fewer victims in future. Absolutely. But there is also more we must do to support victims today. The review recommends a number of important measures, including better identifying domestic abusers at sentencing so that we can monitor and manage them more effectively. And I would like to pay tribute to those who have campaigned on this, particularly the Honourable Member for Eastbourne. I also welcome the recommendation to expand the use of domestic abuse specialist courts, where trained staff support victims. To improve transparency in the system, we will extend a pilot of free sentencing transcripts for victims of rape and serious sexual offences. But I also want to go further than the review recommends to better support victims. Exclusion zones are an important tool preventing offenders from entering areas that their victims might be. But these place greater limits on victims than they do offenders. And I want to change this, locking offenders down to specific locations so victims know they are safe wherever else they want to go. Mr. Speaker, this review sets out major reform. I know its recommendations will not be welcomed by all. By appointing David Gauke, a former Conservative Lord Chancellor, I hope to show that 2 politicians from different traditions can agree on the reform our justice system requires. I don't expect those opposite to join with me to solve this crisis. In fact, I can hear their sound bites already. Just build faster, they will say. Well, we're building faster than them. We have already added 2,400 places and are now investing £4.7 billion more. Just deport more foreign criminals, they will say. Well, we're ahead of where they were, and today we have accepted major reform to go further and faster. Clear the court's backlog, they will say, despite having created it themselves. Well, we're investing more in our courts than they ever did, and we are ready to embrace once-in-a-generation reform to deliver swifter justice for victims. While we are doing more on each of these than they ever did, these are not solutions that rise to the scale of the crisis that they left behind. We must build prisons on a historic scale, deport foreign national offenders faster than ever, and speed up our courts. Yet still, despite all that, we must reform sentencing too. So, more in hope than expectation, despite, not because of experience, and by appealing to the better angels of their nature, if they have any, I end by inviting those opposite to help us fix the crisis that they left behind. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Lord Chancellor Robert.
Mr. Speaker, today is about one question. Should violent and prolific criminals be on the streets or behind bars? I think they should be behind bars. For all the Justice Secretary's rhetoric, the substance of her statement could not be clearer. She's okay. Her party is okay with criminals terrorising our streets and tormenting our country. The truth is this. Any government...
Order. I thought people had come to listen to the statement, and I expect them to listen. I expected this front bench to be quiet. I certainly expect better from this front bench.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is this. any government serious about keeping violent criminals behind bars, any government willing to do whatever it took, could obviously find and build prison cells required to negate the need for these disastrous changes. What do the changes amount to?
Mr Swallow, you're getting very excited. You're telling me how good of a school teacher you are. This is a very bad example of it. Lord General.
What do these changes amount to? A get-out-of-jail-free card for dangerous criminals. Has the Justice Secretary even gone through a court listing recently? Pick one, anywhere in our country. Those currently going to jail for 12 months or less are not angels. They're Adam Gregory in Caen, who got 12 months for sexually assaulting his partner. Vinnie Nolan, who got 12 months for breaking someone's jaw. Sean Lardley, 10 months for beating his partner. Or Paul Morris, who got 6.5 months for shoplifting 36 times. Her plan is to let precisely these criminals loose. It's a recipe for a crime wave. And what about the Justice Secretary's plan for most criminals going to jail to serve just 1/3 of their prison sentence there? For her slashing of sentences across the board, discounts so big they'd make Aldi and Lidl blush. I'd call it a joke, Mr. Speaker, if the consequences for the public weren't so terrifying. In fact, it gets worse, because criminals who plead guilty, and most do, already get a third cut in their sentence. So under her scheme, a burglar who pleads guilty to an 18-month headline term would spend just 1/5 of that term in jail. Barely 11 weeks. 11 weeks for smashing through a family's door, storming through a child's bedroom, looking for valuables, leaving them traumatised for life. Is this the Justice Secretary's idea of justice for victims? The least she could do is here and now guarantee that violent criminals, domestic abusers, stalkers, sexual assaulters won't be eligible for any discount in their sentence. Will she commit to that? And Mr. Speaker, if not prison, what's the plan to punish these criminals and to keep the public safe? Well, the Justice Secretary says it's digital prisons. As she puts it, prison outside of prison. Words that lead most people in this country to conclude the Justice Secretary is out of her mind. I'm all for technology, but tags are not iron bars. They can't stop your child being stabbed on their walk home from school, or a shop being ransacked time and time again, or a domestic abuser returning to their victim's front door.
Can I just say, out from my, I don't think it's the language we should be using. I'm sure the Secretary would like to reflect on that.
Of course, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Justice's own pilot scheme found 71% of tagged offenders breached their curfew. When it comes to stopping reoffending, tags are about as useful as smoke alarms are at putting out bonfires. What is the Justice Secretary going to say when she meets the victims of offenders that she let off? How is she going to look them in the eye and say with a straight face, "I'm sorry"? We're looking into how this criminal escaped from their digital prison cell. Mr. Speaker, her reforms are a recipe for carnage. I urge the Justice Secretary to change course, to make different choices. Yes, choices. Choices we knew they would make from the day the Prime Minister handpicked Lord Timpson as Prisons Minister, a man who's on the record saying a lot of people in prison shouldn't be there. 2/3 of them, in fact, he said, that they'd been there for far too long. The Labour Party are clearly ideologically opposed to prison, which is why they're letting criminals off with a get-out-of-jail-free card, rather than deporting the 10,800 foreign national offenders in our prisons, 1 in every 8 cells, and it's rising under her watch. If she's actually serious about keeping violent criminals off our streets and finding the cells that are needed, will she bring forward legislation tomorrow, disapply the Human Rights Act that is stopping us from swiftly deporting foreign national offenders? Mr. Speaker, there are 17,800 prisoners on remand, awaiting trial. Again, that figure has risen under the Justice Secretary. In fact, her own department's figures forecast that it could rise to as many as 23,600. Is she serious? Will she commit to taking up the Lady Chief Justice's request for extra court sitting days to hear those cases and free prison spaces? Mr. Speaker, if she's serious, will she commit, here and now, to building more than the meagre 250 rapid deployment cells her prison capacity strategy says she's planning to build this year? They have been built in 7 months before, and they can be built even faster. If she was serious, she would commit to striking deals with the 14 European countries who have spare prison capacity, renting their cells from them at an affordable price, as Denmark is doing with Kosovo. Mr. Speaker, between 1993 and 1996, her beloved Texas, the state she modelled these reforms on, a state that, by the way, has an incarceration rate 5 times higher than that of the United Kingdom, built 75,000 extra cells. If the government was serious, why can't they build 10,000 in a similar time period? Mr. Speaker, Labour aren't serious about keeping hyper-prolific offenders behind bars. In fact, there's nothing in the Justice Secretary's statement on locking them up or cutting crime, because their party doesn't believe in punishing criminals, and it doesn't really believe in prison. The radical, terrible changes made today, cloaked in necessity, but the root of them is their ideology, and it's the public who are going to be paying the price for her weakness.
Lord Chancellor.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Minister opposite talked about serious government. If his government that he was a part of had ever been serious, they would have built more than 500 prison places in 14 years in office. He is a new convert to the prison building cause. He and his party have never stood up in this chamber and apologised for only adding 500 places.
I want the same respect from this side as well.
If I was waiting for...
We understand each other.
Speaker, if I was waiting for respect from the members opposite, I'd be waiting a long time. It's a good job I don't need it. Mr. Speaker, he talked about iron bars, but he was part of a government that did not build the prison places that this country needs. Unlike him, I take responsibility, and it has fallen to me to clean up the mess he and his party left behind. Let me spell out for him, Mr. Speaker, in case there is any confusion of what happens when he and his party leave our prison system on the brink of collapse, which is exactly what they did, and the prospect that faced me on day one when I walked in to the Justice Department. When prisons are on the verge of collapse, Mr. Speaker, you basically only really have 2 choices left at your disposal. You either shut the front door in or you have to open the back door out. His party knew that that is the situation that they were confronted with, but did they make any decisions? No, they just decided to call an election instead. They did a runner, and the public put them in their current position. And if they ever want to get out of that position, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest they start by reckoning with the reality of their own track record in office. It should, in any other reality, have started already with an apology. Many times the members opposite have had a chance to apologise to the country for leaving our prisons on the point of absolute collapse, and they have never taken it. And, Mr. Speaker, frankly, that tells you everything anyone needs to know about the modern Conservative Party.
Committee and the slot.
Thank you very much.